Hi, everyone. This is James Giglio, CEO of MVP Interactive, and welcome to the MVP Podcast. Our podcast will bring insight to a range of topics involving technology, consumer engagement, experiential marketing, and general business-related subjects. This show will host not only our great roster of clients from the professional sports world, along with Fortune 500 brands and agencies, but other entrepreneurs and startups. We hope our podcast brings value, and thank you for listening. For general inquiries or topic requests, please email mvppodcast@mvp-interactive.com, and please subscribe to our YouTube page and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and SoundCloud with account name MVP Interactive. Welcome to the latest MVP podcast. We have a very special guest today. He is known as an entrepreneur, investor, digital strategist, and by the way, NFL alumni, Marques Colston. Marques, thank you so much for coming in today.
I appreciate you guys having me today.
Yeah, we have had the opportunity over the last couple of months to really get to know each other on a professional basis, which, you really have a fascinating story. And, we're thrilled that we were able to come together and you learn a little bit about what we're doing here at MVP Interactive and, what you've been up to on the digital space as well as the venture space. So, obviously most people know you as a professional athlete with the New Orleans Saints. You hold every record that manageable for the Saints.
For now.
You won myself and a lot of friends NFL fantasy points and awards, so thank you very much for that. But what we really want to talk about today is your life after the NFL. And so I think, it's a really compelling story and what you've been able to accomplish both on and off the field. And, really as one of the latest pioneers of what pro athletes or former athletes are doing to secure their futures as well as become, more than an individual that is known to play a sport. And so with that, if you could just give us a little bit of background, starting from maybe even your days in Harrisburg, PA as a local guy, just kind of educate our listeners as to your background.
Sure. So I appreciate the intro first and foremost. It's been a really interesting journey. 35 years sounds like a short time, but I feel like I've been able to really accomplish a lot and really just been very blessed in some of the opportunities I've been able to walk into and, just try to make the most of them. And, you mentioned coming from Harrisburg. My story was one that I wasn't really a very highly recruited athlete. Coming out of high school, so I ended up at Hofstra University. It was really the only school to offer me a scholarship.
Wow. Okay.
So really the only school that wanted me at the time, and it kind of became a theme for my career and really my post-career life. Always kind of coming in, a little underrated, off the radar, and having to work and kind of prove myself at every level. And was able to put together a pretty good career at Hofstra as a psychology major of all things. Okay. And, again, the same theme kind of repeated itself. Was drafted like the fourth to the last pick in 2006. Got down to New Orleans at a really interesting time. The year right after Hurricane Katrina hit. That's right. Came in with a free agent quarterback that nobody knew if he would be able to throw the ball again, and a rookie head coach. And, we were able to come together and accomplish some really cool things down there at a time, where the community really needed us. And, it's just been a really, really interesting journey for me. And I kind of mentioned that theme of kind of, being under the radar and flying under the radar and really embracing that opportunity and that challenge. And, I've been able to take a lot of those experiences and a lot of those life lessons and really apply them to entrepreneurship as I transition from sports into sports business. Yeah,
that's an interesting theme too in the entrepreneurial circles, right? I mean, I think everyone understands that, there's when it comes to business and entrepreneurs, you're always going to have that sort of pool of talent coming out of your Harvards or your Ivy Leagues and some of those unicorns type of startups. But then for the overwhelming majority, the theme has been really this, I wasn't the best student. I wasn't highly regarded in the classroom or through academics, but I was a hard worker, and I'd always been, someone that wanted to make things happen regardless of what teachers or principals had said. said. And so, I find it very interesting that and people always talk about, the immigrant mentality as well, where, I think in the book Freakonomics, where you really try to, the author tried to pinpoint, what's that ingredient for success in business or entrepreneurs. And it really comes back down to, I think it's second generation immigrants that tend to be more successful because of that work mindset, right? And really hustling your way to willing things to happen. And I think it takes that underdog mentality to really drive you. Now, again, it's not the universal rule or law, but I think both personally, I can really relate to that message as well. So it's really great to hear that you had that chip on your shoulder as an athlete that kind of taught you, or at least drove you to succeed at whatever you do.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that, and I think that's one of the pieces that has made the transition a little easier for me, is because there are some of those transferable skills and transferable, there's just these baseline tenets, and it's something that I always refer to as irrational confidence. And that's something I probably started saying about 2 years ago. And really for me, and really as I watch and kind of get to know entrepreneurs, it's really the same thing. It's this understanding of what the odds are. They're not in your favor. But ultimately, through hard work, through dedication, and this unwillingness to let go of where I ultimately want to end up, I can overcome those odds, and those, that 99% failure rate that applies to everyone else, because I'm going to work myself into that 1%.
Right. Wow, that's fascinating. So let's talk on that still. Let's extend on that, because I really wanted to wait, at least originally in my mind, to kind of wait to the end of the conversation to really talk about the parallels as what you had learned on field. But if we're staying on that vein of irrational confidence, I'd imagine that there was a level of that as an athlete as well. And so, especially coming into a late draft pick, a 1AA school or what have you. What would you say, because I hear this a lot from especially NFL players, that football is the greatest life lesson. And unfortunately, I hadn't had the opportunity to. I was a late bloomer. I couldn't necessarily, football wasn't my sport, right? But what is it about football that is distinctly different from any other sport, at least on how it sets you up for life down the line?
I think there's a handful of things I can point to. First and foremost, there is no more adversity than literally getting knocked on your ass. Right. and having to get up time and time again. And I think, that physicality, people look at football as kind of this barbaric, physically driven sport, which you actually do have to be a physical person to play it. You kind of have this physical toughness about you, but more than anything else, you got to have and develop this mental toughness. To line up across from somebody that is just as prepared as you, just as talented, just as strong, agile, all the physical attributes, and, go to battle with them play after play, knowing that you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. You're going to knock him on his ass, he's going to knock you on your ass.
Right.
And you got to do that 60 times a game. So I think that physical adversity is something that translates really well, and that's something that even playing the game from a young age, that's something that if you can learn to deal with that piece, it kind of sets the stage for how you handle adversity and how you process adversity. The other piece I think that's really important and really applies to business and really life in general is it's the ultimate team sport.
Right.
The position that I played, people like to joke that it's the diva position.
Right.
But in reality, it's probably one of the most dependent positions on the field, right? I could do my job. I could run the perfect route, get wide open, and there's no guarantee that the ball is coming to me.
Right.
If the center or the guard missed their block, the running back missed the blitz pickup, the other receiver didn't run the complementary route to get me open, the quarterback threw a bad ball. There's so many factors that go into me actually having a chance to be successful at my job, and really being able to be accountable on one side, but be dependent on your teammates, and always be in positions to lift your teammates up and kind of help them accomplish their goals so that you can accomplish yours.
Right.
I think those two pieces are what really helps. What really positions football, as this kind of this life lesson, this kind of beta test for life.
Yeah, I mean, what you just explained is quite literally a microcosm of what it's like to be in a startup in a business, and because one of the things that we experience often is we hear a lot more no's than yes, right? And so it's very similar to those times of getting knocked on our ass, and it's the fact is, okay, for as many no's as there are, there's going to be as many yeses and opportunities, and it's important to just stay focused, to kind of get up, dust yourself off, and really make the effort to get to those yeses. And so, and then obviously the dependency on the team. I mean, no businesses are done by one individual, right? And you need a great supporting cast. And that's certainly something I can relate to as well here at MVP. And, knowing that the next person is going to maintain their responsibilities is really paramount to success on any level. So,
absolutely. Yep.
So that's great. So, understanding that, and I feel like, coming out of, retirement, if you will, which is kind of crazy to hear as someone that's, in their 30s, right? Having all of these life lessons and, just being educated by hard knocks, quite literally, at what point did you kind of see yourself transitioning into the venture side or the business side? I mean, was that happening during your career? Was there anything in particular, maybe a teammate, maybe a coach or a mentor, what have you? Tell us a little bit more about that moment that you knew that you wanted to go here.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that that entrepreneur bug hit me about halfway through my career. And I think a lot of it is just, who I am as a person, my makeup. I've always been someone that, I'm always looking for new challenges and, not necessarily ever looking to, fit into a mold. Right. So, one of the things that always, I wouldn't say bothered me, but it was always front of mind for me was, you kind of get grouped into this athlete bucket. Right. And, the cliche is the dumb jock mentality.
Right.
But, a little bit deeper than that is I've always had this mentality that football is what I do. It's not who I am. And, blessed and fortunate enough to be able to do it at a really high level, but there's more to me than this game. And, that mentality, combined with, a couple really strong mentors and advisors that, my financial advisors, my financial advisory team just happened to be former NFL players.
Okay.
So they instilled in me, pretty early, that this is a really short window, really tight window. And, when you get drafted in the 7th round and you understand, back to that irrational confidence, I mean, you understand that you've got a less than 10% chance to even be on a roster for week one, let alone play a long, a long illustrious career. So, kind of had this interesting mix of situations and people enter my life that, got me thinking a little earlier than most about life after. My 4th or 5th year, I kind of, made that plunge, and my first real venture was actually an indoor football team back in Harrisburg in my hometown.
Okay.
And, I initially, there was an indoor football team coming and they were looking for investors. And my initial thought was, I'll maybe invest and be a silent partner, and this could be a really cool community outreach platform. It's in my hometown, create some jobs, create some entertainment. So this is something that, passively invest in and, go to a couple games, take my family, that kind of deal. And, I did the passive thing for a year, which is really not my nature, but I tried it anyways. Really, really enjoyed it. Got a chance to actually take a look under the hood and, see what the business side of football looked like. And, ended up falling in love with it. And my 2nd year, I ended up buying my partner out, became the majority owner, and literally ran every facet of the organization,
Wow.
from soup to nuts. So, drove my wife crazy at the time.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's talk about this in terms of the soup to nuts nature of it. And as people that are listening to this, and even me, what have you learned in terms of, being that sort of passive partner or the silent partner to then really getting your hands dirty? What lessons did you learn there in terms of what it meant to be a business owner? And, what would you tell yourself now back then?
Yeah, it was really interesting. You learn really quickly that everyone has an opinion, right? So as that passive owner, I kind of had my opinions on how things should operate. And when I actually got the reins, it was that slap in the face, like, okay, there's things that you want to happen, and there's things that have to happen.
Right.
And those two things don't necessarily align a lot. They very rarely align. So for me, it was, kind of getting everything thrust onto your plate, and figuring out how do you manage time, how do you manage resources, how do you create resources, and at the same time, how do you figure out that work-life balance.
Sure.
So there were a lot of lessons that I was learning on the fly, just in how to manage the opportunity, let alone all of the technical aspects of every facet of the business, which unofficially became my MBA.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's funny because I talk about this often where, an MBA had always been sort of an interest of mine, but there is no comparison, in my opinion, that this is going to be your best education by doing and getting yourself involved. So on the education note, let me ask you this though, with that first venture, did you have to pull some of your psychology education into managing, some of those individuals?
Yeah, the prime individual was myself. There was a lot of those
Okay.
Those self talks in the mirror, like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Because I was literally still playing. So I was down in New Orleans.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, I was down in New Orleans, playing in the fall. Would fly back to Harrisburg in the spring and literally run the team because it was a spring league. So. There was a lot of soul searching and just trying to figure out what's the end game here. Definitely had to kind of talk my wife into it. Sure. Because it's more than most. I mean it encompasses you. Right.
And see, that's the key, though, because I think especially now with this trend in entrepreneurship and, social media is a big sort of platform for a lot of people that may think that they are or do things that like, oh, okay, I'm doing this, so I'm an entrepreneur. But what you just said really resonates because I think that's the true indication when it becomes an obsession, when it consumes you and there is not a waking moment in your head that you're not thinking about that business is really when you're in it.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
And it's almost like if that's not happening, then just write it off because it's just not going to work. It may work for short term, but you can't really be in this pool together.
No, I mean that's so true because it's easy to be an entrepreneur when things are going well,
right.
But to your point, it's when you start getting hit, those punches to the gut, and you really have to take a look in the mirror and you got to find the wherewithal to deal with that and actually envision what it looks like on the other side of that adversity. So
right.
It kind of entrepreneurship is really in a lot of ways how do you process adversity, because that's one of the few certainties in entrepreneurship.
Right.
There is going to be adversity,
sure,
whether it's personal, it's on the business front, and how do you process it, how do you deal with it and use it as kind of that engine that can continue pushing forward. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, sorry to bring it back to football, but I mean, I think one of the things that I identified with is like, you have to take the highs with the lows and try to remain even keel. And I think that's another theme in playing sports as well, where you're going to have successes, you're going to have some failures, but it's how you process that, as you say, and just how you keep going. So again, I mean, it's just an amazing parallel that keeps happening, right? With the crossover.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as some know, I know that you're now a part owner of the Philadelphia Soul as well, and so what were you able to? And maybe I'm just speaking for you here, and though you had your first team in Harrisburg, and now you had that under your belt. Talk to me about the transition to maybe even going to maybe a higher tier of an arena team, and then what that looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So the Soul opportunity was a really interesting one, because it was still ownership, but it was in a lot of ways a different role. So in Harrisburg, I was this owner operator, running business ops, football ops, personnel, marketing, sponsorship, the whole nine. And what that allowed me to do was step into the opportunity with the Soul with this much clearer picture of exactly what the business side looked like, and it allowed me to actually partner with some really established business folks on the football side, on the business side as well, and it really positioned me to have some interesting conversations with those guys, and also be able to take a lot of the workload off of my plate as well. So
right.
It ended up becoming a natural next step in my progression, just in terms of, the types of deals and the types of, really it became scale, right? So what I was doing in Harrisburg was very similar to what's happening at the Soul level. You add a zero or two. And as you continue to move up the food chain, the business doesn't really change. It's literally running it at scale. So when you get to NFL, NHL, NBA, you just add another zero or two, and it's the nuts and bolts of the business are very similar.
Right. Right.
So that next step into the Soul, really, in a lot of ways, it's cemented in my head. The education that I was getting and the boots on the ground, experience, it almost validated it for me that, I could step into, a situation that had been around for a while, won a championship, had owners like Ron Jaworski, Craig Spencer, Cosmo Di Nicola, and, have conversations and actually, have real conversations around business strategy and how do we move this thing forward. It kind of became a self-validation for me that I was, going down the right track.
Right. And again, you said another phrase that spoke to me, is that you considered yourself an owner-operator at the Harrisburg team. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like, once you were able to kind of remove yourself of the day-to-day operation in the weeds, so to speak, mm-hmm. and now with the Soul that you're an owner where you have that extra zero, or at least you have a scale that mm-hmm. makes you more of an owner than an operator. And I mm-hmm. think that is a big struggle for a lot of businesses, especially small businesses where that pivot period hadn't happened, or that scalable moment hasn't happened. And
mm-hmm.
so, you operate the business versus owning the business. Or, I read something recently that said, once individuals, CEOs or business owners should be working on the business, not in the business. Mm-hmm. And, that's another example of, kind of transitioning into a growth and knowing that you're on that right path. And,
For sure.
And so that's really fascinating. Okay. So on this avenue here, we go from arena, Harrisburg to Philadelphia arena team. Do you have aspirations to kind of take it to the next level, or is that off limits here?
I don't know. We'll kind of see where it goes. I don't think there will be a shortage of opportunity, just in the sense that the sports landscape is literally changing on a regular basis. And I think just in the last decade, we've seen what's happened with the MLS and how that league has expanded into, it's now considered one of the big five, I guess. So, as you look at esports and you look at a lot of these other niche sports leagues, that are popping up, we'll kind of see what the future holds once we get there.
All right. We'll see you in that owner's box on TV one day. We'll see. Okay, so I thought it was coincidental. A lot of the things that we do now are still very much out in the open in the marketplace, and we're at venture funds and pitches and things of that nature. So I guess it was maybe 6 months ago we coincidentally ran into each other at one of the sports tech forums and investor pitches and all of that good stuff. We sit on opposite sides of this table in terms of startup versus investors. So talk to us a little bit about your involvement on the investment side or on the venture side, and companies that you're involved with, what you like, and maybe even some lessons there.
Yeah, absolutely. My experience on the venture side is, it's for me, it's all been, kind of this journey and this progression, and hopefully, we're not at that point of culmination. Hopefully there's a lot more, ahead, but, I've been in the angel investment space since about 2012. And, my focus has always been on sports technology. So it initially started around, performance. So the big data craze was starting to pop up into sports, towards the latter part of my career. And it was just an opportunity where I could enter into a space and have a really unique understanding of at least one component of the business and be able to learn the context around that one angle. So I initially started as an angel investor there. Realized that I was never going to build a portfolio of 30 companies and just kind of sit back and wait for one to hit. Right. Realized pretty early on that I was more of an entrepreneurial investor. I was somebody that if I really believed in a company, I would invest and I would roll my sleeves up and play an active role in helping the company get to the finish line. So I kind of worked at that for a handful of years, ups and downs. Really learning what it meant to be a technical investor. And there's a lot of nuance and a lot of education in there. So I kind of carried on with that on the angel path for a while and realized that at some point I had this interesting perspective, right? So I, NFL player, owner operator at the pro sports level, and was stepping into this investment space, and there just weren't a ton of people that had that same resume that I was building. And at the same time, one of my partners at the Soul, we had been having conversations around, we see what's going on here. We see the rise of sports tech, and we see that this point of intersection that started in performance and data and analytics and big data around performance, the scope was starting to expand. And, as that intersection point continued to grow into media, into fan engagement, we quickly realized that there was going to be an opportunity to leverage, our knowledge and our expertise and our platform of arena football, into, opportunities to work with early stage companies. And, that ended up evolving into a group that we launched about 10 months ago called Delta Venture Partners. Mm-hmm. So we're a group based in Philadelphia, and we're what you would call a venture development firm. So we work with sports, entertainment, hospitality companies that are tech enabled. And, we look to bring, marketing, business development support, IP, intellectual property, patents, trademarks, that kind of support and strategy, and the ability to, beta test and really walk the companies that we work with into opportunities to validate their product or service and, really get in front of people that normally they might not have access to. So we saw an opportunity to really package those three things up, and, being, in the startup world and being, on the sports side, you understand where some of those soft spots are that you can take advantage of. So we started to package that up into Delta Venture Partners, and, we've had a lot of fun, finding the right companies and the right entrepreneurs that we wanted to work with. And, that last piece is just as important as the company. We want to partner with entrepreneurs that, we feel like are very passionate, very knowledgeable, of course, but, are people that we enjoy being around, because, right. This isn't a 6-month engagement. This is, we understand that the time horizon is, 7 to 10 years. So we've got to be able to be around people, have fun with people, work hard with people, that we ultimately want to share success with.
Right, absolutely. And so I think you answered my next questions or set of questions or comments in that understanding that on the investor side of things, most companies or funds really have a thesis in terms of maybe the vertical, right? So you have your biotech, you may have sports, you have fintech and all that good stuff. You did answer it, but my question is, outside of the vertical, what do you really look for in businesses and the entrepreneurs that are involved in those as real interest points for you guys?
I mean, we try to keep it as simple as possible. Obviously, we have the technical back end on the diligence side, and to make sure that companies are in position to actually grow. But initially, what attracts us to companies are the opportunity to leverage our resources and actually really move the needle. And the other piece is like I mentioned, we want to work with entrepreneurs that are good team members.
Right.
We want to be able to roll our sleeves up, and literally, become part of the founding team in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And there's got to be a cohesiveness there, and there's got to be this willingness to go back and forth and work with one another, knowing that, again, that adversity is coming. So can we augment a team and become part of a team that's battle tested and ready to face adversity and work through it and get to the other side where success ultimately is. Yeah,
I find it really interesting too in terms of how you've structured Delta Venture partners in a very unique way, because on the other side of that coin, from a business or a startup perspective, I think there's this idea that any money is good money, right? And so, hey, we're going to raise X amount of dollars. We want millions of dollars. We want seed and you're just kind of cash grabbing, and and that's sort of the mantra of a startup, right? And I think one of the lessons that we have learned, and sort of this carries on to a philosophy, is that strategic partnerships, or the partnership that is tied to any level of investment, is far more important than the actual dollar figure. And I'll argue that all day long. I mean, sure, $1 million will do a lot of things for people, but if you're getting half of that with the right partner, that's going to transcend, the bank account for the short term, right? And so I think what you guys are doing is really smart, because it's not only just a cash fund, it's really more of a strategic working fund, in the sense that you're adding services that companies may need and couldn't necessarily or traditionally pay top dollar for IP or things of that nature, or even marketing expertise. And so, really unique model. Congratulations on that. And I think it's nice to see that you guys are local to the Philadelphia area as well. And I think the emerging tech scene here is fascinating to be a part of. And, we're really, I think this is the story of Philadelphia as a whole in a lot of ways, that we're overlooked by some of these other larger cities, whatever the industry may be, whether it's in the startup world, the New Yorks and Bostons and maybe even DC. So forget about what's happening on the West Coast, let alone that. But
it's a whole different world, yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And so I think it's great that, us included, that we're a part of this budgeting kind of growing startup scene and tech scene, and, to hopefully really kind of extend it to, eventually a Comcast level of recognition with what we're doing here in the city. So,
yeah, I think that's the goal. And being local, living in South New Jersey, you can feel that there is this tech scene that's bubbling, and obviously sports has been really, really important, just to the makeup of the city. And I think, being in sports tech in this time and space is really unique because all the sports teams are really playing well. The sports tech scene as a whole, I think, starting to get more and more recognition, and it's starting to creep into other industries that you wouldn't traditionally think, would be a part of it. So I think there's this unique space and time that we feel like, we definitely want to be a part of the emergence, and at the same time, there's kind of this soft spot that we feel like we can really leverage to help some of these companies get to the forefront a little quicker.
So outside of the maybe this is the answer, but speaking to Philadelphia, was your interest in the Harrisburg team one of the main driving factors that brought you back to this area, knowing that, with generally where you work is where you live, and so for 10 years you were in and around the New Orleans area. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I loved my time in New Orleans.
I'm sure. You win a Super Bowl, any city. You're the mayor, right?
Yeah, you get dropped into New Orleans at 22. Some interesting things happen. But no, I love my time down there. 10 years. Both of my children were actually born in New Orleans. So it was tough to leave, but at the same time, the rest of my family is here in New York, not New York, in Harrisburg. My wife's family is here in South Jersey.
Okay.
And, family has just always been, the main driver for me. So we knew at some point we'd always end up back in the Northeast. And, South Jersey it just represented a really good opportunity for us. To be close to Philly, to be close to New York, close to DC,
right?
And just kind of be right centrally located in those metro areas as we were trying to grow businesses and really trying to take our business experience and acumen to the next level. So that's what initially family and opportunities what drove us here, and we'll probably be here for the long haul just because there is so much anchored here for us.
Right. Very cool. Well, Marques, I could probably talk to you for the next 4 or 5 hours straight, but I know that we have a business to run and you have things to do. But before we go, I want to ask you if who is it that you look up to in this space in terms of, being a very similar makeup as you, whether they're former athletes that are now in the venture space, and whether we speak to the Kobe Bryants of the world or LeBron James, or someone even outside of sports that you really can admire in a sense, or at least learn from, and that kind of helps you in this whole body of work that you're involved in?
That's a really interesting question. And I guess I'll take the easy way out. No, like even as a player, I kind of realized where my strengths and weaknesses were, and I always took the mindset that I would take bits and pieces of the players that not only I admired, but I thought that we had similar skill sets, at least in those particular areas. So that's kind of how I approached my playing career. And I guess my approach on the business side is very similar, so I'm definitely aware and cognizant of a lot of the athletes that are doing really significant things in the space, across the board. Whether it is Kobe with the venture fund, and Carmelo Anthony's doing a really interesting deal with his, I think it's Melo 7. What LeBron is doing really across the board, just watching him be in the spotlight from age 16 to where he's at now, and seeing that evolution real time, and understanding that in a lot of ways the media world has been waiting for him to fail, and he just hasn't given them that bait. There's a lot that you can pull from that. Seeing what he's doing on the education side and the community, and the social justice and community outreach side. There's a lot that I try to pull from various individuals doing really good things.
Okay, fantastic. What final statement? What piece of advice would you give someone looking to get involved in either entrepreneurship or starting a business? And again, that's across the board, no matter what the background is.
I mean, I would probably go back to that irrational confidence statement. You know, the odds are going to be the odds, and you know, your ability to understand those odds and take the necessary steps to de-risk your opportunity is going to be important. But at the same time, you know, letting your success become a product of the work and the dedication that you put into it.
Right.
You know, that's a hard landscape to navigate. But if you can figure out the best way to understand what the risk factors are and where the pitfalls are, and be willing to work your way through, you're gonna set the stage for yourself to have a chance of being successful.
Absolutely, very inspirational. Despite being in the weeds still and kind of running that, you know, it's always nice to hear some other voices that really understand it. And you know, it's not about moving left or right of that pitfall. It's just running right into it and coming out of it, right? That's it.
And so that, through the wall sometimes.
And that transcends beyond business and life in general. So that, I think that's a fantastic point to end. And so thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode. Marques, would you like to promote any social channels or anything that you'd want our listeners to kind of follow you on or keep pace on? No,
I mean,
okay.
You know, keep checking out MVP Interactive, man. You know, it's been a joy to get to know James and his team, and you know, kind of get a behind the scenes look at what all you guys are doing, and you know, really excited for the next steps for you guys.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you everyone. I hope you enjoyed. Well, until next time.